Awesome. So I might make a start. For those who don't know me, my name's Kerrin. I work for Betfair Australia. My role is Senior Client Development Manager, and my job is to help people engage with automation and modelling, um, which is where this comes from. I have a huge passion for community and for helping people to connect with each other with shared experiences and giving people a chance to share their learnings and I guess the journey with other people, because this can be a pretty isolating gig otherwise. And the more we can do it together, the more successful we'll be. So Betfair has a philosophy of winners, and we host these in the spirit of that. We have two wonderful guests with us today, very, very different backgrounds, Roy and Liam. We'll go through an intro both of them in a minute. Before that though, there were a couple of things I wanted to flag. So a little bit of a teaser. We've got a couple of comps / promos coming up. So got our Australian Open Datathon. Anyone who's been around a little while might have seen us run one of those a couple of years ago, modelling the outcome of matches during the Australian Open. We're just waiting to see when the dates are to be able to give a bit more away on our end. But you know, get your tennis hats on, because that's in the works. We also, if you haven't seen it yet, this won't be relevant if you're watching this sort of after the event, but Black Friday this week, we're doing some pretty cool stuff. So if you haven't seen that yet, head to Twitter, Facebook, the Hub, and have a little bit of a look, because there's some nice extras there, particularly for anyone who's betting racing. I have just a couple more things. So one, for anyone who's new to automation or new to betting on Australian racing, we're running a how to build a racing bot session on the 8th of December. That's hosted by Nick Beinhold, who's one of my clients and someone who has been on one of our meetups before. It will be a step through tutorial, I guess, workshop on how Nick would go and has gone about building his racing automation, and some tips and tricks to avoid the potholes along the way, especially when it comes to Australian racing. So feel free to sign up if you are interested in that. I'm doing a call out for contributions to our GitHub repo. So particularly keen on anyone who's got a repo they might be happy to share for interacting with the historic stream data. If you've got something you might be happy to share with the community, please hit me up. I would be very grateful. And the final thing I will flag before I intro the guys is the Slack community. So anyone who isn't on the Betfair Quants Slack community, strongly recommend it. Like I said at the beginning, in the spirit of community, it's, from my perspective, probably the best place to interact with other like-minded people. I'm daily impressed by how open people are and how willing they are to share their experiences and their learnings with the wider community. And particularly in these more locked down times, even as we ease, it's still hard to do things in person. The more we can interact online, the more we all benefit from that. So strongly recommend it. Feel free to shoot an email through. I'll get one of my wonderful team, Ben, to pop a link down in the chat. If you just email automation@betfair.com.au, you'll get me and the guys, and we'll shoot you an invitation. More generally though, if there's anything that we can help you with in your automation data modeling journey, do reach out. That's what we're here for. And it's me and Ben and Ash on my team, who are incredibly great guys. So we will try and help where we can. So final point, this evening we'll have about half the session is an open Q&A. So down the bottom, if you haven't seen it already, there's a Q&A button. You can drop questions in there at any point. I will address them sort of at the end, but please, as you think of them, chuck them in there so that you don't forget. The more, the better. And any that we don't get to, if there are any left over, we'll share them on Slack at the end. So Ben, who is the wonderful reason that I don't have to apologise for tech problems in these sessions, could I intro Roy, please? So hopefully I get Roy with some video and some sound, if I'm lucky. Maybe. It's going to be a very long hour if it's just me talking to the screen.
I've clicked on Roy, just waiting for him to start his video. I just clicked up, so hopefully he starts.
You need to accept it at your end. There we go, and unmute as well. There we go, we did it. Phew. Oh, awesome. Roy, hi, thanks for joining us this evening. New to the meetup space, but not to our community. You've been around longer than almost anyone. Do you want to unmute and share a little bit of your Betfair story? You've been around an awful long time with us.
I think I've been in Betfair since day one in the UK, and then when I arrived over in Australia, Betfair was just kicking off over here at the right time. So when I was moving here, Betfair was kicking off, which was great. And I've seen all your progress with Betfair Australia, which has been superb, to be honest with you. And the service that you guys give to the punters is second to none. And all the information that you share is pretty spot on, to be honest with you.
That's what we try for.
Exactly.
That's when we hit the mark. So what was your background pre-Betfair? Do you come from a wagering background? Is that?
Well, to be honest with you, I started my life as an apprentice joiner, and very early on you're taught to bet in the building trade. So the apprentice wages were about £28 at that time, and I think I was putting 15 of them straight on the horses on a Saturday morning, or the greyhounds on a Saturday morning. So I think I got hooked very early, because I got a lucky 15 came up about my second bet, and it turned about 10 weeks or 12 weeks wages in one go, so that was perfect for me. So that started me on the wagering trail, and ever since then I've just had businesses on my own, served my time as a joiner, had my own businesses from then on, 21-year-old onwards. And to be honest with you, I've bet ever since. And I've had some highs and I've had some lows, but some massive experiences and just incredible. And my life's really revolved around betting and gambling, to be honest with you, for the whole next 30 years odds. So it's been great. I love it.
When would you consider that you went more sort of pro with your wagering?
To be honest with you, when Betfair started, right away from day one, I was in there trying to lay horses and work out how to get an edge and things like that. And I was pretty successful at the laying, but I was laying on Betfair and winning, and I was walking around to the bookies and betting horses and losing. So it took me a wee while to go, wait a minute, you should just be doing one or the other. But I was always caught up, because I had a couple of pubs in later life as well, and with the taxi company that I had as well. All these things worked around guys, and everybody was betting all the time, so they always wanted to have a bet. So I was taking bets, I was offering odds, and I was betting on everything, to be honest with you. Every type of bet, exotics, laying on Betfair, the whole lot, to be honest with you, as soon as it came on board.
And where along the way did you get more sort of data driven and model based in your approach?
Probably when I came to Australia. As soon as I came to Australia, I decided after a year here, I wanted to make something that was going to provide like a stock market return, so that you would invest your money in Betfair, because it's just an exchange, isn't it? Let's be honest, you can pick it up and stop and start when you want. So you sit in your living room and you can play in the stock exchange, and it's your money, you control your money. And so, to be honest, we wanted to build a model that laid horses, backed horses, and that was my main focus. And I decided that I was going to make something like it's now called the Ripple methods, and it just keeps performing. And it's all run to Betfair SP, because I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to make it honest, so that everybody, if anybody wanted to pick it up at a later time, would pick it up. And eventually I threw it into the coaching, and now I give all the guys that come on board with the coaching the Ripple methods, which is quite a good giveaway, to be honest with you, because it's absolutely got every single rule and thing that you need to make your automation and make your betting be controlled and understand strike rates, probabilities, return on investments. And if you sit and really dig into it and then you just take it as what the actual product is and dig into it and start putting your filters and layers in, it really turns into some machine.
No, definitely. And you're big on automation too, aren't you?
Definitely. I mean, I use Peter's for Bet Angels, probably the main one that I use. Although I don't teach people how to do it, but because Peter's a big enough company for him to get in touch with him and speak to him, and there's loads of guys on Twitter that you can interact with, and they'll help you all the way.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think the thing is far more about the approach, not necessarily how you automate, but that, automation is just so much more consistent in your results.
That's right, definitely. You take the human element out, because loads of punters will have winning methods, but because they're having to put the bets on themselves, that'll be it. They hit a losing run, they lose 10 points, 15 points, it gets thrown in the bin, and then the next thing they miss the 30 or 40 points profit. So it's really, it does take a lot of emotion out of it, which is great.
It's amazing how many people I've talked to over the last few years who say that, if they were to run their profitable method manually, they have, they've been manual and it's been unprofitable, they've automated it and it's profitable. You can't do that with everything, but there are a lot of things where we just get in the way.
That's right. And that's probably the worst thing for a punter, because they get in their own way and they listen to other people and then they look to see what somebody else is doing and they're distracted, and it really does just put you off. You better just get in yourself, get a good automation going, put your bets on, set your bank. And to be honest with you, I'm a believer in setting your bank and letting your bank run. And even if it's aggressive, you might blow a couple of banks, but it'll teach you a hell of a lot, And if your method does work, it will pick it all back for you.
Yeah, that can be an interesting one. Like, that's something I've heard from a lot of people, and it's really tricky, I think, for a lot of people who are more analytically minded, is to have the risk appetite to turn something on. But it's interesting how many people in this sort of situation have said, you got to turn on, because you can do all the modeling and all the back testing you want, but at the end of the day, the only thing that actually matters is what happens when it's in the market.
Exactly.
With the butterfly effect and everything, at the end of the day, you don't know.
Everybody can bet without putting money on it. So the minute you start putting money on is when you start to learn if you're good or bad. And you will have some things that will go against you, but you have to build some layers on some of your stuff, jockeys and things like that. And you can add things in that will help you, and rather than just take the bare essential or your raw data, for want of a better word. So when you start to have a look at things, prices, and where you can be profitable and where it works better, that's when you'll start to really make money.
Yeah, and real, your own data, not just other people's.
Exactly. And of course, Betfair gives you all that. And I built everything with the SP because I wanted to be able to relate to the SP all the time. A lot of people will look at the SP because in Australia, obviously, the SP is growing and growing, and it's getting more and more efficient, to be honest with you. The price of a horse now in Australia, especially with the liquidity coming into the markets now, which has been great. The guys have been doing a brilliant job of pushing that, and the liquidity is really flying now, which is great to see. I love it. And the prices of horses in Australia are now getting to be the prices they should be.
Yeah.
And a 10-to-1 shot will be a 10-to-1 shot, a 4-to-1 shot will be a 4-to-1 shot, and it's quite hard to get your edge in there.
Yep, and I like that about modelling against SP and backtesting against SP.
Exactly.
And as long as you're not putting down absolutely humongous sort of stake sizes, and we've talked about that sort of previously in previous meetups, it takes quite a bit to move the SP.
That's right.
You can pretty reliably know what you would have got within, a few points of error.
The beauty of the SP that I use is because I do most of my stuff, say, laying and backing in the UK. So during the night in Australia, which is great, I sit up sometimes and I've obviously speak to all my clients and that, which is great. I love them all. And the SP is one of these things that it's growing and growing. And because the amount that we are putting on, I try and get some of my guys to put the money in a wee bit earlier when they know the SP is definitely going to be, within our range, because sometimes it will be sitting dead on our SP and we will get caught one side of the coin or the other at times, You can't exactly get it spot on, because if everybody could predict the SP, we'd all be millionaires, you know.
Beating SP is one of the hardest things.
Without a doubt.
And if you can, basically you can print money if you can
That's
roll.
right. We got a wee sore lesson there, because we were doing quite a lot of work in the place market, and had a lot of guys doing it. And to be honest, we were practically running the place market there for a while in the UK, which was no the cleverest things for us to do. We took a wee bit of loss there, but we'll get it back, and we'll have to work hard just to recover that. But that was just one of these things that we're an aggressive bank, we've got to learn, you know. And that's the good thing about Betfair, you will learn, and that'll teach you, you know.
In terms of SP, I think SP is one of those interesting things that, coming from an outside perspective, I think the perception is that it's a product that's only going to be used by mugs, and that the more sophisticated you get, the further away you go from SP. Because my experience is generally actually the other way around. That
100% agree with you.
You tend to go towards SP.
You'll find that people are going, I'm going to beat SP, I'm going to get in early, and they're betting a horse at, say, 4.8, and the SP goes off at 4.3. Brilliant, they've beat it. But you'll find that the 4.8 that they got, they're not going to get that every time, and when they keep taking that, it'll balance it. It balances it pretty much bang on. I mean, I've done mountains of research into that, because the beauty that I've got all my BSP data, and I can look to see how often, if I got a point better than that, or half a point better, would it have worked, or if I went lower, and I can see exactly where the money is. And to be honest with you, the money in Betfair and following the money, I'm a great believer in money maps as opposed to anything else, because in any business, you want to see where the money is. Tell me where the money is, and I'll show you how to make it, you know?
Agree. Yeah, actually, putting money where your mouth is. It's
exactly.
why.
And one thing I would say about the Betfair SP is taking back data for some of the stuff. If you go too far back, it's pretty much useless, because it's evolving, you know. So now, go back a couple of years, 3 years now, you can really get a good look into it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We talk about that in Slack quite a lot. It's sort of there's a conversation this week. How far back do you want to collect data to model against? Because, as we know, the markets do change and they shift, and
definitely
that can be a tricky sort of balance. For you, how far back do you take your data? Is it 2 years, give or take?
I'll be honest with you, I like to go 2 to pushing 3. In the EPL, I'll take the EPL back maybe 3 to 4 years, but 3 years is enough for me to do the EPL, and 2.5 to 3 years is enough with the BSP for the horses as well. It gives you enough data. It gives me something like about 16,000 results, which is great to work through and start to analyse, you know. You can really dig into that and specialise.
In terms of your inputs for models, let's talk racing. What sort of, without giving away the house, what sort of inputs do you value that might be a little left of centre when it comes to your models?
One thing I always want to do, and to be honest with you, Kerrin, a lot of people say that I'm not sharing things, I'm not telling things. I actually love to tell people exactly what their foundation should be and what they should build on. And I give that away when they come in and do some coaching with me. And I'll tell them to have a basis, and then you can build layers on top of that. And that's really important. And to be honest with you, I use only horses at the front end of the market for laying, because that's where all the money is going to be. That's where all the liquidity is going to be. And that's where I'm always going to practically get matched at a price that I know is going to be in my bracket. Because I don't want to be laying 14 to 1 shots and 10 to 1 shots. I want to be at the front of the market, first or second in the betting. All right, I'm going to take a hit quite a lot of the times. But at the same time, if you get your model right, your strike rate when you're laying will be up 66%, 68%, and then you're building your return on investment on top of that when you put your filters on. So a lot of things, when you go back to the actual question, you've got to take into account a lot of things. I like tipsters to be tipping all my horses. If everybody tips my horse, I love it. And to be honest with you, I'll take it on then. And we'll do the research into why we should take it on.
There have been a couple of interesting articles this week on how tipsters can move the market. Did you read this? There's one on Waterhouse's tip of the week.
That's right.
It's backing up exactly what you're saying.
And it's funny because if you just watch a couple of the guys even on Twitter when they're maybe putting a lay out there or putting a bet on, you'll see a wee bit of movement in it straight away. And I can tell when I put my football tips out, I can see straight away the market changing. And the lucky thing is, one of our main things we've been betting on this year, which has been really exciting, I just launched it this year, is a correct score in the EPL. And it's amazing because some of the prices will come in, but some of them will drift, and then the ones that drift are the ones that hit. You know, you're hitting 100-to-1 shots in that, which is incredible.
It's nice when it goes that way around.
Oh, it's brilliant. And we're doing it pretty regular now, so it's been a really interesting thing, you know.
When you're, so you say you bet both UK and Australian racing.
Yeah.
What are your main sort of takeaways of the big differences? Are there A, in sort of, you know, the input you use, and B, in how you bet them?
Liquidity is a big thing in the past, but come a Saturday, come a Wednesday now in Australia, you're starting to get the money in the markets, which is great. And there's a lot of guys out there on Twitter, that the Magic Millions specialists, the boys that are turn up for the Betfair thing at the Magic Millions, they're really promoting things and working for people and working with people now. And they're getting interest up, and they're putting tips out that are pretty good. And they're getting a return for punters, and punters love that. And that's getting the liquidity there. And that's really, to me, a good thing for Australia. But the UK, I've never got a problem with anything matching or working on anything, because the liquidity is there. So I think once the Australians keep growing in their Wednesdays and their Saturdays, liquidity is going to be superb.
Across spring, our liquidity was huge. We just did
brilliant
analysis, and the sort of percentages that we're up in terms of the volume that's matched, therefore that equates to the amount of money in the markets. It's just staggering.
It's been brilliant.
Yeah, and even a year ago, it wasn't bad. But
that's
you know,
right.
Yeah.
It's growing. I mean,
Really
you look at how Betfair grew in Britain and it took over. And to be honest with you, the problems that the TV and that I've had lately, and the amount of people that get banned and things like that, or restricted, I mean, Betfair will let them on, and as long as you're going to do it properly, it's going to work, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. Is there any sort of particular standout differences in the inputs that you use differently in the two countries?
And what do you mean by that, in inputs?
I mean, do you
as in for searching for data sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably because in Australia, I would say that I'm absolutely SP based, whereas in the UK, I'll take on all the tipsters.
Okay.
But in Australia, I just follow where the money has been in the past, and I'll look and dig into the meetings. I mean, I built a thing for Australia called I call it the money map. And to be honest with you, the money map identified on a Saturday that Australian favourites should be probably 3.21. Now, that's a pretty general price. But if you follow that, since maybe March this year, say, you're up about 75 points with a strike rate of 26%, which is a favourites strike rate. But your return on investment is something like 14%, which is massive. Now, when I try and model a price, I can't beat that. And that's just going off a straight 3.21 above that for value on a Saturday at the main meetings, like your Flemingtons, and that's just a simple thing that you can model and just build on, you know. And when you start,
I've heard people before say similar things, that especially in Australia, our favourites can be too short.
Yeah.
I think that I know you're more sort of gallops focused than harness, but I think that's even more true on harness. That's what I've heard and seen.
Yeah.
Is that we, particularly harness punters, tend to get overexcited, and shorties tend to be a bit too short.
I've watched the harness racing and that, and I've had a look at it, and there's a couple of guys came in and wanted to model some stuff, and they've done it because they had a great idea, and they just needed to dig a couple of layers on top of what they've done, and they would have got a really successful thing going, you know. And same with the greyhounds in Australia as well. So,
yeah, greyhounds are flying.
Greyhounds is growing in Australia. I've done a lot of greyhound stuff in Australia with guys. It's been really successful.
We're like over 100% up year on year in terms of growth.
Aye, it's massive. It's the same in the UK. It's grown in the UK as well. I built a simple model for a few people, and they've been away playing with that for the last 4, 5, 6 months, and the results have been incredible, to be honest with you. I didn't think you would get the returns and the liquidity. You can't get the volume on, but if you put that in your portfolio and say, right, I'm going to put so much away to that, and my Betfair account's going to do that, you'll make your money.
Exactly. I mean, that's my big thing about automation generally, and particularly about modeling things. If you don't uber specialize, is that you can scale, you know, sort of with width instead of depth. You know,
That's right. That's right.
try and bet wider.
Exactly. That's definitely. And there's so many different options you can have. You can lay later liability, you can back win, you can, and everything can be automated, which is great.
Interesting in Australia too, we're getting more exacta markets, which are also, you know, if you can model a price in the win, you can probably model the exacta.
Well, I done that on the model that we done for the people, exactas and trifectas, and because unfortunately you're not getting on them with Betfair because it's quite difficult, but you were getting on with the bookies, but you're getting good odds, you know, and certain tracks will show you every single time where the money is, whereas other tracks you just don't want to touch them, you know.
You know, in Australia recently, we've been holding more than the tab on our exacta markets.
Wow, that's incredible.
Worth noting that there's some decent liquidity there.
There you go, eh?
I will just note while we were talking about SP and sort of data sources, anyone who's watching who's keen on SP data, obviously there's the promo.sp site that you can go to and download, I think, forever's worth of SP files day by day if you're keen on that. Obviously easier if you can set up something to programmatically go over it. But we've also set up internally some sort of month-by-month versions of those files that are Australian-centric. So if anyone's keen on those, just again, hit us up and we can get you access to that if that's useful.
See, that's a great service for punters that want to build their own stuff. That's second to none, you know, it's just brilliant.
You know, especially if you're not someone who can easily, you know, write something up to scrape it, you know, you then download.
Oh, definitely. I mean, all my stuff was done off manual typing every day and messing about, you know, until we've got the team sorted out here. So, and we're going to grow this team a wee bit further now again as well. So that's going to be an exciting year next year, hopefully.
Nice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump across to Liam.
Okay.
Come back for a Q&A in a sec.
Perfect.
Good. Ben, I will let you do your magic. Thank you, Liam. There we go. And unmute. There we go.
There we go.
Yes.
All right. Nice to be here. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Liam. Very much appreciated.
No problem.
So what's your story, your background pre-Betfair? Obviously haven't been on the exchange as quite as long as Roy has. I hope not, given that would put you well under the gambling age. But what's your background pre and post Betfair?
Trying to think broadly in terms of gambling / trading. Briefly worked as a financial trader over in Sydney. That was a sort of eye opener. Taught me a lot about, say, more trading philosophy, and I would say actually learning how to trade anything successfully. Again, the glory days of solo prop trading aren't quite what they used to be. Yeah. And yeah, so I sort of specialise in UFC markets personally. So really, a lot of that's been based on my own experience in sport. So I played rugby, American football, BJJ, MMA, all pretty high levels. Just said you go up to heavyweight, just suddenly there's no quality anyway, so it's just easier. Yeah, so a lot of my stuff's probably more broadly qualitative, since UFC is a strange sport, but again, there's a lot of quant insights I tend to like using.
And so you're, I know you focus particularly, as you said, sort of on, MMA, martial arts. I know you do some stuff for the Betfair Hub sometimes, which we appreciate. Some good insights there, and also some odds racing sometimes. What's your sort of approach when it comes to, you said qualitative versus quantitative, to building a price for, let's say a UFC, MMA?
I'll say a lot of my modelling is more about understanding. I don't tend to come up with an absolute price at the end. I tend to just more about price ranges. Again, UFC is a very volatile sport. Sport's only been around 25 years. You've got 40 events a year. It's just the sample size isn't there. Like we've got guys who've had title fights off 20 minutes of less than 20 minutes of cage time. It's insane. And again, like guys are coming from regional fights in Peru, fighting guys in regional fights in Kyrgyzstan or something, and nobody has any real, and it's all just YouTube 120p quality sort of stuff. It's a lot of just sort of understanding processes of the sport and figuring out. Like my approach to quant's more about understanding what the few people brave enough to be quanting in the market are doing, so I can kind of ignore or take value from what they're doing. Mine's more just sort of like quant judo as opposed to necessarily building into it that much myself.
So trying to, I guess, take the market, the smarts from the market and then capitalize on that?
I mean, there's all different approaches. Like, you know, UFC is a strange market. You can see that about a day or two out beforehand, you see a bunch of cash flows from, like I said, sort of modeling crowd. They just like certain things. So it's like a matter of, all right, you just stay out of the way. But if there's a fighter who's got a great age advantage or great height advantage, and so, you know, there's some really low-hanging fruit in the UFC space. Like, the stat I've always liked for the last 5 years, if you just bet every time a guy is shorter than his opponent and has longer reach, it's been 6% ROI, just close, which is insane by most metrics. And that's a 600 fight sample. So it's not racing style, but it's still something fairly significant. So just, you know, navigating that kind of thing tends to be quite advantageous, even if it's very basic, just because there's real paucity of sources.
So what sort of data inputs are you using? You know, tipsters, like you said. What else?
It's an issue where, so UFC, the official numbers are supplied by a company called Fight Metric, who are detested by everybody who tries to use them because they only offer 7 stats. Like, you know, it's like if AFL only offered goals, behinds, and clearances, and that's all you're working off, and you're going, well, I'd like more than that. So really, I've had the advantage of, I'm not sure how many people know daily fantasy sports, but obviously a whole another galaxy over in America, which quite fortunately doesn't tend to intersect too much of what we do in terms of betting markets. There's just a sort of segregation there. And so I've worked with some guys who we've kind of manually gone for a bunch of old fights, counting out what we consider to be a significant strike, takedowns, control stuff, and building a sort of better thing. Like, I've heard like horse racing, guys who used to sit back and vanaracks and just roughly gauge how far a horse has travelled in the race and use that in their form and that sort of stuff, just that sort of stuff.
There's still people who, and who put that into their models, you know, people who will watch the grade trials or, you know, and do the sort of sectionals manually and their own comments, which is exceptional commitment from my perspective. Hard to get that into a sort of, I guess, a quantitative structure. Do you even try, or are you just using it as sort of qual?
Some constant structures. Again, like, it's a lot of it's just how poor Fight Metric data is. So like, even having a semi-real data set is enough to work basic stuff off. Like, I've got some guys I work with who we're betting quantitatively, stuff like striking tempo is massively important. But like, the way the UFC provides data is I'll just give you how many punches this guy's landed. It doesn't matter what distance he's at, what he's doing, what the context is, and that sort of stuff. So you just get these outlier performances where it's a guy just dominates his opponent, lands 300 punches in 15 minutes, and for the rest of his career, that's just in his Fight Metric data. So it's a matter of really just cleaning out the times where it's just it's like if, you know, we counted Roger Federer's stuff against a 16-year-old school kid, and it's like, well, that's nice, but is it relevant when he plays Nadal?
I know that with I had a similar experience with modeling greyhounds, and the value of the sort of comments, if you can sort of find a way to ingest and parse the comment data. Yeah, otherwise you don't know whether someone was knocked, whether they were interfered with in their run. You know, you just know whether they, you know, from a really simple data set, you only know whether they won or lost, and what their starting price was, and that doesn't tell the whole story. You know, and yeah, I've had lots of people talk about this. You know, in that instance, you know, if they're knocked, you then sort of discount or give them a sort of you know, a mark against their score, so that you're not, you know, simply, you know, counting the whole thing off. And I suppose that's an equivalent of what you're saying, is to give some context to the rest of the data that you're looking at.
And particularly since UFC it's you know, you can only really perform as well as your opponent lets you, because, like, you know, there's a lot of other, like racing in the day, a horse is running, it's going to kind of run regardless in similar times. Obviously, UFC, it's like, you know, you can get absolutely shut out by somebody who's 5 points better than you and absolutely roll over somebody who's 5 points weaker than you. So it tends to be a lot of advantage in just learning how to pass how good people's competition is, even if it's a bit alternate in terms of stats.
And in terms of, you know, you talk about sort of the philosophy of trading. Have you taken much of that into your philosophy of betting?
Yeah. Again, like when I was back at PropX back in the day, I'd come and sort of tail end of this trade called 10s, where you sort of played a correlation of US 10 years and Australian 10 years. It's kind of trading jargon, and there was a bunch of guys who'd been around for a while and were hanging on for the old glories and had made money a bit. And I sort of saw that, and I sort of went, this sort of taught me it's always good to make sure you still have an edge.
Yeah, that's always, I think that can be tricky when we talk about that pretty generally, is is how, you know, to constantly sort of review what you're doing and see whether it's still successful. I think the challenge there can be to know what sort of time periods to review over, you know. So with your stuff, I think it's particularly hard for someone like you, because race, you know, you can go, okay, well, if I have a run of 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks and it's still, you know, it's still going down, you know, at which point do you call variance and go, well, actually, this isn't variance anymore. This is starting to look like an actual trend. Way harder when you have, you know, 40 events a year. How do you measure that in terms of your sort of ongoing success and whether you need to change what you're doing because something else has changed? You know, maybe someone with an amazing model came into the market. How long would you give it before you called on that? Need to unmute. Still need to unmute. Ben, can you unmute, Liam?
Yeah, I can't do it from my side for some reason. I
Gotcha.
think Ben has to give me privileges and bing. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, again, it's a very volatile sport. 10 bouts a week. I tend to play a lot of underdogs, a lot of props. So again, you get crazy occurrences. Like say about 3 months ago, I sort of had a downtrack for about 25% of bankroll, and I sort of recently evened up. So it's just like one of those things where you can't really give in to despair too quickly. So it's just one of those things. Just, you know, in terms of, as long as you're beating the BSP, or still not BSP, but essentially the closing price in the UFC, it's weak, but it still exists. Shows at least you have a consensus of the rest of the market. And yeah.
And do you find, so this is, you know, something that we talk about generally, is where Betfair comes into its strength and where it doesn't. And, you know, we totally acknowledge that there are areas where, you know, the exchange is stronger and weaker. Do you find that it's worth betting on UFC in Betfair markets? Is there enough liquidity? Are the prices good enough? Or is it something where, frankly, it's just better to take a corp or a tort price? Ben, did you mute Liam again? There we go.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, in terms just liquidity's boosted up. Like I can pull the numbers. Obviously, I work at Betfair, so I can kind of see what's happening. And think we're up 4x year on year. Again, it'll be interesting to see how much that's COVID, and really just sort of keeping up efficiency. So yeah, Betfair, it's quite unusual. We've got some interesting market participants who try to lump in at the end and can give some very good overs to everybody who wants to go against them. I probably shouldn't be talking about that, but if you ever want to be watching UFC markets at the close, you can probably score a bargain if you don't like what that guy's doing. Yeah, in terms of just, it's quite a sort of, you know, it's one of these markets where it's not necessarily led at the exchange at this point.
Good. I always love to hear that. You know, I know it varies so much from, you know, sport to sport, and they can be the things where historically you wouldn't go to the exchange, and to see, and you know, you're not the only one. I've got a few other people who model UFC, and seeing people start to take the Betfair prices more and more because they say that they're better, is really, really promising, and hopefully that trend manages to continue.
It depends what you want. Again, if you're running against the market at the end, you can, you know, if you get back yourself against what the big players want to do, you can get some great prices. If you want to go on the same side as them and trying to get the close, you're going to end up like 10 cents worse than you should be.
Yeah, no.
Sometimes they'll blow out. Like there's, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose a bit like we were saying with favourite bias, that favourites can be what they should be. I think that can go across a lot of things too. As we've seen recently on a few different sports, shall we say. Thanks, Liam. Any other particular sort of takeaways that you'd share? Like, you've got, you know, a remarkably rich bit of experience. Anything else you'd really, you know, like to have known 5 years ago?
A lot of my stuff's sort of just keeping abreast of, you know, honestly, when I first started out with UFC, I managed to beat the market for a bit without any understanding of real betting, just taking prices as I saw them. It was I got quite fortunate back in the day, but again, most experienced gamblers tend to have those moments where they've gotten fortunate in the long run. Yeah, so like, you know, again, plugging into the understanding Betfair as a platform and really having that quant, yeah, it's one of those things where even if I'm not using quant to bet so much, I'm trying to use it to frame my qual angles. It's still very important to have a general wagering IQ and just understanding of how wide a BSP is what it is and how wide a close is what it is in most sports.
The thing one of the things I really respect about you is how sort of well read you are broadly, that you stay really abreast of what's going on in the wagering IQ space. You know, you always, if I suggest anything, you've been there before me, and I love that. I think that from my perspective, I see that really, you know, influences your success rate, and I think it's a good, some good learnings there, that it is worth investing that time to, you know, be across what's going on and to continue to sort of develop your own skill set.
Yeah, I'd say also the biggest edge is understanding how and why edges happen rather than necessarily any singular edge. Like anything is transitory. Like, you know, I got guys on the trading floor who'd made millions off this one trade, and it went one day, and you know the US algo started picking it up, and that was them done. And like, you know, it was a slow death of just slowly grinding out and just losing at 2% at the close in trading terms. So it's like, it's one of those things where you need to make sure you're not too hooked up to any one edge, and just make sure you understand how my things occur. Like, again, it's easier to find, say, you know, to make a living, it's easier to find $5,000, $20,000 edges a year is to find one $100,000 edge.
I completely.
Or 10 grand ones. You know what I mean?
No, I completely agree. And that's sort of what I was talking about earlier in terms of, you know, going wide and sort of deep. And it really protects you too against market changes. You know, as you know, in terms of, you know, UFC betting, let's say that someone suddenly comes in with, you know, a better model than yours, you know, you don't want to have nothing else to sort of fall back on. So I do agree that the more you can diversify what you do, and I see that in your activity, you do know more than just, you know, fighting. I think that you know, is really positive if you can find other strings to your bow. What we might do is open for questions. So could we have Roy back, Ben? So I've got a couple here, but please drop a few more in here. Racing specific, UFC specific, betting specific, philosophy specific, or just more generally if there are sort of other things you want to throw at them that are left to centre. You know, I always like those. So first up, give Liam a break. Roy, we've got a question about your Ripple method. Can you give a little bit more of an overview of ballpark what your high level, non-coaching approach is?
Well, basically the Ripple method's got a selection process that I give to all my clients, and they can either work through that every day and find the selections, and then they can start to lay to liability on that. And it's a completely laying method, laying to liability for the UK stuff, and the return on investment is running about 14.41%, round about that area just now, and that's for overall. But there's more work you can do to it when you actually start to understand it, and you can see there's on the actual work document every day, there's a price on there that it tells you what price you should be playing to. My price is a lot higher than that, but if you actually play to the price that's on the screen that you should be working and understand by the time you've done your probability, it really brings your, say, let's just say you would have 1,200 bets, it'll half your bets and give you 8% more return on investment. So it's really quite an intricate thing that you can play it to the method and play to the bigger price, but when you start to dig into it and put layers into it, you really turn it into a laying machine that's absolutely superb for the British market.
So it's effectively, am I right, in essence, like a set of ratings or filters that, you know, you use as a starting piece?
Yeah.
And
they'll go through a selection process, and then they'll come up with an actual selection. And when they've got the selection, they can lay that. And I give a general price out, which is quite a high one. But when you look at the screen and understand what you're looking at with your probability and what your odds should be, if you play to that price, you'll get a better return on investment for half the work. And working half the time is always good in anybody's book, you know?
Yeah. No, I do.
And plus there's a couple other ones with the ripples as well. There's a couple of backing methods that are got a couple of rules in them as well. And they run to different ROIs as well. Ones are very low one, but obviously you're chasing higher prices. But they're all turning a pretty much a good profit, and they have done over the 3 years. And even with the bad times where the UK went off there, and the UK came back on in June, and from June till now, I think it's made over 5,000 again. So it's not disappeared, although one of them has had a sort of standstill period But that'll probably kick in now because the racing's starting to pick up in that type of bet, you know.
So in some respects, it's a bit like, you know, us providing a set of ratings on the hub, you know, the thoroughbred ratings or the greyhound ratings, where no one expects that the core of what's provided is going to be, you know, the be all and end all of anything. It's then how you take that and how you bet.
That's right. And if you dig into it a wee bit further, and then you put a couple of other layers on top of it. As I say, the price is a very important one. If you look at the price, and that helps you narrow your betting down. And when you start to build on top of that, you could put jockeys in there as well. And again, put the jockeys in and keep a note of your jockeys, and that will give you a better strike rate as well, and a better return on investment. Silly things like that.
Something I found really interesting, particularly through our sort of meetups, is how many people use other people's tips and models as inputs to their own models.
That's right.
So I guess it's kind of the inverse, though not necessarily, I suppose it could be the same approach, but kind of the inverse of what you were saying about wanting to go against the British tipsters. You know, that if they're on something, you want to be the other side. Have you, and the same thing applies to you, Liam, in a, you know, either racing or non-racing space, have either of you sort of utilised that as part of your models?
Not so much in modelling, but just generally, I tend to work a lot with quite closely with other sort of successful UFC guys, and building consensus is generally helpful, and just generally knowing where people sort of specialise. And again, like, you know, some guys might have a great affiliation at certain ends of the sort of technical spectrum, where it's like, you know, if they're staying off something, like I know a guy who he's probably one of the best wrestling analysts I've ever met. He just knows his stuff, and like if I have a contrary wrestling opinion, I tend to just say to him. So it's one of those things which just like, yeah, knowing your own strengths, knowing why and how the market's strong, and you can walk around it really.
And how about you, Roy? Have you used those as inputs instead of, I guess, I don't know what the opposite of that is because it's not an output, but you know what I mean? Instead of just taking the opposite, have you taken them as sort of inputs to your models along the way?
Definitely. I mean, what the one of the main things I use is opinions of probably 8 to 15 people every day. And I love to see what they're thinking, and I'll use that and have a look at that and think, okay, well, it's a pretty straightforward process, and that throws up one selection, and it's these people that have selected it, to be honest with you, and then we just use that as our foundation and build from there, and that gives us our power because we can then have the same sort of selection methodically chosen for us. Yep. And I find that really a great way to do it. It's the same people, a lot of people use Timeform, and they'll go against Timeform or they'll back with Timeform. And I've done Timeform research for about 3 years, and there is a really profitable area in Timeform because they give you 3 selections per race. Yep. And if you dig in and work on price and work in between, say, 4.7 and 8.2 and things like that, you'll come out well in front when you start picking the selection that's going to be in that area. Silly things like that you can build and model and work out, you know, because it's just the way that Timeform are doing all the homework for you, basically. And they're giving you 3 selections to work from.
This is like Paul was talking about this a couple of meetups back. He was talking about how, he has all these different little models that run, or strategies, I guess, that run. And like that, you know, you find these tiny little niches, and it all just builds up and becomes that sort of spider web that is what you do.
That's right.
I think people, you know, from a layman's perspective, might think that, you know, you need one winning strategy, and that's how you're a professional hunter. And yeah, the more I'm in this space, the more I sort of try and emphasize that that's not how it plays for basically anyone.
It's pretty difficult to do that, because if you look on Twitter even and you see maybe a good tipster, and there's a lot of them out there, they'll maybe hit a bad spell and they start doubting themselves, and they didn't need to doubt themselves. They just need to keep working through and have a look at what's going wrong, but obviously try and identify exactly what it is. You'll never ever find that because that's the world we're in. But you will have variance, you will have losing spells. It's as simple as that.
And I think, yeah, again, that's where having more is better.
That's right.
Question on SP, and I think you'll probably both have a take on this, both from personal experience and just more generally the wider environment. The question is about the strength of SP in Australia, and it goes on to talk about, you know, given that, you know, there are state official prices, tote prices, et cetera, and smaller liquidity than in the UK. do you find that it's a product that isn't as reliable here, or is it strong? Obviously, I've got an opinion, but I think I'd like to hear. Roy, do you want to share yours, and then I'll definitely toss to Liam too, because I know you've got an opinion on it.
Well, I would say straight away that the liquidity in the SP obviously wasn't as good as the UK. That's a known fact. But if you look at the Australian stuff now, with the work that all the boys and yourself are putting in, the SP is growing and it's getting stronger and stronger. And you look at a Saturday now, and you look at the turnover, and you look at what the SPs are coming in at. It's, to me, it's not very long before it's going to be the exact price a horse should be in Australia, and you're going to be the same as the UK very shortly, I would say, because more and more people are getting wise to the Betfair, and they're starting to move away from other people. And to be honest with you, it'll just happen, and it'll happen very quickly over here, where people will just understand that the Betfair is going to give them the fairest price they can get on with.
Liam, what would your take be?
Trying to think in terms of racing. I think there's the BSPs. There's always the issue of BSP awareness, where the absolute mug punter has nothing. Then you get to a certain point where you understand what the BSP is, but you can't really understand enough to meaningfully interact with it, apart from try and pick off other books. It's one of those things where it's just kind of like, I think over time, definitely it's liquidity boosts, and generally just the market sorts itself out. It has definitely come up, like even so the addition of, say, New Zealand Greyhounds and all that, getting the BSP products definitely allowed them to start picking up some more expertise. But again, I think there's always going to be holes, like picnic races. You always, anything on Tuesday, race 3 at 4 o'clock is probably going to be okay for a while. I'm sure UK is the same, but again, we have what I think 5,000 times the amount of race courses per capita that the UK does. The UK's got like 8 race courses or something. And just who can know all that? It's just, I think definitely it's trending towards efficiency, but again, the financial market's supposed to be trending towards efficiency, and people still keep finding things. So it's just like,
I think the interesting thing on Australian SP, there are some really outdated perceptions in terms of how much you can get on for. There's sort of this perception that if you toss in a couple of hundred, you're going to move it, at 20 cents. And what I've known for a while, but I've loved having people who will put a couple of thousand on, speak to it in some of our recent meetups, is that, for them, that's their daily reality, and they only bet Australian racing. And they use it really heavily in what they do. My general take would be, ballpark, if you're betting really, really short runners, you can get lots and lots on, but probably it's going to be a slightly shorter price. Like we said earlier, you're going to get people piling on back, and therefore it'll be shorter, which is good if you're laying, less if you're backing. If you're going in that sort of mid-range, it has this really sweet spot where you can get good money on. We're talking probably $4 through about 20. You can get good money on, and it's a really good price. We're talking 15-20% better than the corps normally. Then once you get past 20 or 30, if you're putting a bid on, you're fine. If you're going to pile on, you might start moving it. There's some sort of general ballpark figures, but I think that SP is underutilized. Obviously, for me, I don't care whether people use SP or not, except that I want them to get better prices so they get better edges, and generally SP is the better price. The other one that I would say is super underutilized is the limit SP option, particularly when you're automating. So going, okay, I'll take SP, but only if it's better than X. So if you're backing, I want it to be better than 4. If I'm laying, I want it to be better than 3, as in lower. I think that should be utilised a lot more. That's my opinion. But
well, I've got quite a few people. I've got over 100 people playing in the UK, and probably 16 guys playing in Australia regularly every day for me. And to be honest with you, we do the limit SP on a few things, but eventually you've got to just put a couple of hookers in there as well, because people get wise to it, because it's like everybody will pick up on it, and when you start seeing figures and prices and, oh, there's money there again at that price, and people pick up on it, so you've just got to be a step ahead.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't, especially as more people are getting better at using that data in advance.
That's right.
This is a slightly interesting one. Question about our Black Friday promotion. So the hashtag on Twitter is Betfair Black Friday. The question is, how do you guys think it might impact early liquidity? So for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, have a look online. But basically, it's if you bet on Friday, you'll get a commission discount on. If you bet into Saturday's racing markets on Friday, you'll get a discount on your commission rate on any winnings, obviously. So obviously the line there is to try and encourage people to bet on Friday. Do you think it might impact liquidity? Do you think it's not going to fly?
I think the main thing that will come down to is that the person that's going to be wanting to use it's going to have to get the price they want.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's the bottom line. If somebody's happy to take the price, then they're going to take that offer.
Or use SP. Again,
that's right. That's right. Or use the SP, put their bet on and use the SP. That's right. And with a limit SP, even with the price that they want,
Unfortunately, I don't think ESP is not included in the Black Friday deal.
There you go.
Oh, rats. Well, yeah, so reverse that bit. What do you think, Liam? Do you think will make a difference?
As I work in marketing for Betfair, yes, 100%.
Corporate line, I like it. It'll be really interesting. The one thing I will say, so I don't know whether people saw on social that last Friday we did a zero-com promo on Sandown Greyhound markets.
Yeah.
And it was incredible to see the liquidity on those markets. We had some of the biggest markets we've ever had on Greyhounds, like multiple, and the actives, the turnover, everything was up an exceptionally high amount. And that for us just really brought home how price sensitive people can be. I mean, we knew that, but
that's right.
It's nice to get that sort of proof in the numbers, and I hope that that'll show on Friday this week as well.
Well, I think you've got a couple of additional things that'll make Friday busier in Australia. The boys on Twitter make that a lot more interesting with a couple of things they're doing, which is great, Nick's got a thing going again, which is always brilliant, to keep the punters really interested.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. There was another question that came through too about accessing that more bulk BSP data. The question said, "Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Roy." But this question's for Kerrin. So if you want that, shoot an email through to data@betfair.com.au, and then you'll get to us. And one of my guys will give you access, or hit us up on Slack. But yeah, we've got a gated portal where we can get you that for, I think we go back to 2017, so there's quite a few years of it, and that's updated monthly as well. It's just easier to get instead of daily, and B, with an Australian slant instead of a UK slant. Otherwise, I'm trying really hard to keep to the hour, so I will wrap up. Thank you both for joining. I like that this is a slightly less sort of dev heavy conversation than we've had in the last couple, and I think it's important to show that people can take an analytical view of their activity without necessarily being data scientists or professional developers. And from my perspective, I think it's important to see that you can use data in your analysis and in your betting from lots of different perspectives. So thank you both for taking the time, for sharing, for being so open about what you do. And for adding to that community. We will take it on Slack for if anyone wants to continue the conversation. I know there's been some chatter going on, which I always love to see. Otherwise, I will say again, anyone who has any historic stream repos, I'd really love to hear from you. Anyone who wants more data, hit me up. Equally, if you're not on Slack, you should be, so let me know. And watch this space for Black Friday, and also for our datathon in hopefully January or February, depending on what the tennis players decide to do. So thank you, Liam. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Ben and Ash in the background. You guys are awesome. And until next time, have a good night.
Well done.
Yep, thanks for having us.